All right, so I'm going to share something with you, and it is not going to make sense. I'm giving you a fair warning right now that this is not going to make sense. It's going to be illogical. However, we will arrive at this very illogical conclusion by using nothing but pure logic as you understand it, right? As you understand life to be from your own personal experience, that's all that we're using here, okay? We're not going to use any theory. We're not going to use any philosophy. We're just going to use pure scientific facts that can be proven and life itself as you yourself experience it every single day. Nothing but pure logic will bring us to this very illogical conclusion. And that illogical conclusion is your own immortality, which can be factually proven, not theoretically, not philosophically, but actually scientifically, factually proven. And again, this does not require any deep dive into any books or anything like that. It just requires just some pure logical deduction, just some pure logical thinking to bring you at a very illogical and hard to a conclusion that's very hard to wrap the mind around itself, but it has to make pure sense. It is irrefutable, cannot be argued or denied. And here we go. I'm going to prove your own immortality. As crazy as it sounds. How would you define the past, right? If you ask most people that question, how would they define the past? You know, most people would say something that happened, right? We don't want any abstract definition. Right? There's plenty of abstract philosophical definitions that one can give. But for this definition, we would want something that's very, very, very practical, very pragmatic, very something that whether you were a spiritualist or you were an atheist, you know, everybody in the room could all gather around and say, yeah, that feels about right. You know what I mean? Like that's about a fair definition of what the past is based on how we all seem to experience it. Right. That's the type of definition that we're looking for. Nothing abstract, nothing like, it could be that, but one never knows. You know what I mean? We want something that everyone, based on their experience of living, could kind of define as the past. And when you put it that way, everyone kind of agrees that the past is something that has happened, or rather, to put it more clearly, something that we remember happening, right? It's a memory, it exists in the mind. You know, it's not this actual physical place, but it's something that you remember having. It's an experience that you remember having, and an experience itself is a sensation, it's a feeling, you know, that's kind of left with you that you remember having, you know, and of course, the more intense that experience, the deeper that memory, or the longer it seems to last, you know, with you, be it a pleasurable experience or be it one that's painful, the more impactful that moment was, that sensational moment, the longer it seems to last within the mind. But we all understand that the past really is a memory. It's something that we remember. It's not an actual tangible place. And by that definition, we also understand that everyone in the universe fundamentally has their own unique past, right? Because you can ever only experience the world from your perspective. Right? You can't be in somebody else's mind. We're not talking about any ESP here. Again, we're just keeping very simple, practical, pragmatic definitions as life as we understand it, as everybody kind of on the same plane understands it to be. You know, you understand that you can only experience the world from your perspective and no one else's. So everyone's past has to be fundamentally different. We can share the same event, like you might be watching this right now, you know, or whatever. You think of a concert. You can go to a concert and everybody is there at the same event, right? But everybody is also having their own unique experience, and that you're in your body seeing the world from your point of view, and everyone else is in their own bodies kind of seeing their world from their own point of view, right? So it's a collective experience, but at the same time, it's an individual experience. And this shouldn't fascinate us at all, because when you think about it, all of the universe kind of works this way, where you have all of these individual parts that seem to work individually, but at the same time collectively for the sake of a greater whole. If you just look at the human body itself, right? Your body has all of these different parts, both large and small, right? You have your heart and your lungs and your stomach and your kidneys and your liver and your brain, you know, and you also have very small parts like the different cells and bacteria and stuff like that in your body. And when it comes to cells, they even have smaller parts within the cells, right? There's the plasma and all these, I don't know all the parts of the cell, but you know, I know there's different parts, right? And those parts within the cell, they all work independently, but at the same time, collectively for the sake of the cell. And that cell is working independently, but also collectively with the rest of the cells for the sake of the body. And it's the same thing with the organs, where they're all working independently, doing their own unique jobs, but at the same time, they're working collectively for the sake of keeping you alive, right? And that's how all of the universe, when you just look at whether you're looking at plants or insects or animals, human beings, whatever you look at, everything seems to behave that way. You know, that's just the way that that nature works. So it shouldn't fascinate us when we think of our experience of the past being the same thing, where yes, you know, you can share an experience collectively, like everybody can kind of be at the same event, but at the same time, everyone is going to walk away with their own unique experience and thus their own unique past, right? So what would be an interesting play in a sci-fi movie, which I don't know of anyone that's really addressed that, is, you know, going back in the past, but kind of choosing which past you go back to based on the person. Because again, everyone fundamentally has their own unique past, because the past is really only a memory. And I don't believe anybody would disagree with that. I don't believe that, again, whether you're a spiritualist or an atheist or, you know what I mean, a neuroscientist or some philosopher or whatever that case may be, I think that most people would be able to come to some sort of a fundamental agreement that that's what the past appears to be based on experience. It may not be what you believe based on a religious idea or again a belief or a philosophy, whatever, but just based on the scientific fact in the experience itself, that seems like it would be a nice neutral definition that everyone can say, all right, if we're playing by the rules, we'll go with that, right? The past is something that takes place in the mind, okay? We established that. Now the future also is something that we understand has not happened yet. And because it has not happened yet, logically, we really can't say that the future is some tangible thing, right? It exists as an idea in the mind, a thought of an experience or of a possible experience, right? It is the possibility that you might experience a particular thing, but it has not happened yet, and thus it does not exist, right? That's just pure logic. I don't think anybody would disagree that the past exists as a memory within somewhere in the brain, right? Wherever memory is stored in the brain, right? And the future is also something that is thought of. It has not happened yet, and it has its own area in the brain as well. So we understand that the past is in the mind and the future is also in the mind. Now, this puts the present in a very precarious situation when you think about it, right? Because we've always been kind of taught to believe that the present is this place that sits comfortably between the past and the future. Like it has its own separate spot in space and time, right? There's the past, and then there's the present, and then there's the future. And we're kind of always comfortably hanging out in the present, right? But when you think about that, when you think about life as we experience it, what we notice is that as soon as one moment ends, another moment begins simultaneously. Like not one and then the other, but one and the other happening at the same time, right? Now, this should not seem hard to believe, because when you think of, if you're familiar with quantum mechanics, there is something known in quantum mechanics known as entanglement, where if you do one thing, of one particle is entangled with another particle, you can separate these two particles. Universes apart does not matter. You know, when you do one thing to one, the opposite will happen to the other at the same time, faster than the speed of light, right? And it boggles the minds of some of the greatest scientists and minds on the planet, because no one really understands how you can have this connection that seems to operate, again, beyond the speed of light, which should be impossible, right? Nothing should be able to move faster than the speed of light, but yet you seem to have this magic that can happen between these two particles. And this has been scientifically proven, you know, time and time again. It can't be disputed, even though it is hard for many people to wrap their minds around, right? This is the past and the future happening again at the same time. That's almost the same thing. It's entanglement, right? Where as soon as one moment ends, another moment begins simultaneously. It is the beginning and the end, the alpha and the omega. That's where your conscious being is at all times, at the alpha and the omega, the beginning and the end. And even though I use words like alpha and omega, you know, you can take that out, because I understand that some people don't, again, I don't want to mix religion into this, but I use that terminology because that is the language that our ancestors use, because they understood and they were trying to kind of drop a little breadcrumb for you, like, hey, wake up, this is where you are. You're at the alpha and the omega, the I am, right? So again, take that out, right? You don't have to have that in there. You can use whatever language that makes you comfortable. We don't have to use the language that our ancestors used in their mythologies and stories or what have you. Take it out, whatever makes you comfortable. We can just talk as pure, logical scientists, atheists even. Like I said, anybody can have this conversation, and anybody would agree that the past and the future are happening at the exact same time. As soon as one moment ends, the other moment begins simultaneously, with no gap in between. This would mean that the true definition of the present is not an independent place between the past and the future, but the present is actually a merging of both the past and the future. It's not the two apart with the present in the middle. No, it is a unification. It is a merging of both the past and the future, which is crazy, because we know this. We know this is how we experience life itself. When you just think about it, one moment is ending, the next moment is beginning quickly. Think about speech, right? Think about how it is when you talk. You have to think about everything you say before you say it. But as you're thinking about it, it hasn't yet happened, so it doesn't yet exist. But once you've said it, now you remember saying it. That means it has happened. It's in the past. It happens that quick. It's as if time is flowing right through you. Boom, right? But both the past, we understand, and the future are thoughts. And that's the tricky thing. We've already established that the past is something that exists in the mind, and the future is something that also exists in the mind. But these things happen at the exact same time, which means that you're not actually moving through time. You can only be moving through thought. And that's irrefutable. According to your own personal experience, plus the scientific information, it's irrefutable. That's where you are, not moving through time, moving through thought. And that's life. But thought at its most concentrated form, which is the point of experience itself, right? The point of sensation, that's again what experience is. The sensation of, you felt something. That's ultimately what an experience is. It's the memory of a feeling, right? That's the sensational moment, the point of impact, that point where one moment ends and another moment begins. Right there, the Big Bang, boom, that's where you always are, right? And at that point, thought in its most concentrated form becomes physical. It becomes an actual form. You're at the core. Like the sun is a bunch of gas, but at the core, it becomes compressed and solid. That's where you are. That's where you are as thought. Thought at the core, at its most concentrated form, becomes physical, no? That's the only thing that makes sense if we follow the thread. And you know that the future and the past can only be figments of your imagination. That's what they are. Think about it. Again, I said we would use pure logic. That's what I promised you. I said we would use pure logic. Nothing but pure logic and life as you understand it to be. No theory, no philosophy, nothing. We would use nothing but life as you yourself understand it to be, but we would arrive at a conclusion that was completely illogical. How does that even make sense? How can you be nothing but a thought, yet physical at the same time? And it vibes right with quantum mechanics, superposition, where you can have things in multiple states at the same time, existence and non-existence at the same time. And that's what you are. Because you exist, you're a physical being, right? You can reach out, you can touch things, you can taste, you can smell, right? You can breathe, you can sing, you can dance, you can love, right? You're a being, you're a physical being, you feel sensations, you know this, right? You can reach out and touch the wall, huh? Get in your car, drive, shake a person's hand, give a person a kiss. You're alive, you're a physical being, you know this. But at the same time, you know through your own logical reasoning that you can only be a thought. And a thought isn't actually anything, it's no thing. Which means you both exist and you do not exist at the same time. And if you do not exist, how do you kill immortality? That's not to say that the body, the flesh, the physical form can't die. But if all you are really is a thought, how do you kill the thought? It's not a thing. So what happens to the conscious awareness, the intangible you, but ultimately the real you, right? Because you were never your body when you think about it. And there's no better way to understand that than in death, right? If you can recall losing a loved one, if anybody's been in that unfortunate situation where they've lost a loved one, you can have the physical body right there in front of you. They're still physically there, but in that moment, you understand the difference between the body and the conscious awareness, because you understand that their conscious awareness is no longer in that body, and thus they're no longer alive. They can't animate their body and communicate with you as they once did, right? Their conscious awareness is permanently gone, but the physical body is still there. They're still physically there, but in that moment, you understand that that's not really them. What was them was this collection of experiences, their thoughts, their emotions, their feelings, their joys, their pains, their insecurities, you know what I mean? Their loves, their wisdom, you know what I mean? All of that came together and made that person who they were within this shell. But all of that stuff was intangible. The real them, the real you, is something that is intangible. It's a thought. So how does that die? Right? How does that? That's not the physical form. We've established that, because when you die, when a person dies, right? When a person dies, you know in that instant that the body is not what you want, right? You want the intangibles, right? The real, what that person was, the intangibles, the sensations, the feelings. That's what it all comes back to. And that is understanding, the beginning to understanding who and what you are. And that is important, especially for the Black man, to understand who and what you are, because this is your history. This is what your ancestors wanted you to know from the beginning. This is what you were supposed to be bred to know from the time that you were an infant up until the time that you were adult. This was the schooling that you received in ancient times that prepped you to understand how to operate in your world, right? This is the beginning of that. So if you can wrap your head around that, as hard as it may be, and take your time with it, take your time with it, and don't lose your mind with it, because there's a lot of places, there's still a lot to learn. There's still a lot to learn, but if you can just wrap your mind around that little bit there, that is the beginning to something amazing. I can promise you that. I can promise you that. That is the beginning to something amazing, and understanding the world as it really is. But first you have to, and the world ain't gonna change overnight, right? The world is still the world. It's still the physical world, all right? Don't try to go through walking through walls, some stupid stuff like that, all right? Just take your time. Take your time and just understand there's a different way to perceive the world, contrary to the way that you've always been conditioned to see it, okay? And the sooner you begin to understand that, the sooner we can collectively and harmoniously work to making changes that are to the benefit of the world itself. And I know I'm kind of going far there, all right? So again, I don't want to stray. Now I'm kind of straying into what one might call philosophy or theory or religion even. So I won't stray that far away. And we can just come back and just keep it practical. It is still something that cannot be refuted. You know, struggle with it as you want. You don't have to accept it. You know, if you can vehemently and adamantly just say, no, that's not the way I want to see the world. That's fine. That is 100% completely fine and anybody's choice, but you will not disprove it. You will not be able to come with conflicting factual evidence to disprove it. You yourself, based on just life as you know it to be true. It's irrefutable, right? It may not be how you've been interpreting your experience of life up until this point, and thus to get acclimated to this new way of thinking of a thought world that is somehow materialized, that can be like, whoa, wait a minute. What does this mean about reality itself? But here's the thing. That's been a question that scientists have been talking about since the discovery of quantum mechanics itself, because quantum mechanics definitely told us that, you know, the experience is one thing, but reality and the experience, they're not on the same plane, right? And we learned that 100 years ago, right? Over 100 years ago, mankind figured that out, that the experience and reality, not necessarily the same thing, right? So this should not come as a surprise to anyone that is familiar with sciences such as quantum mechanics or what have you. But again, nothing. I encourage you, please, let's. I encourage the discussion. I engage you all, please. If you feel as though you have some conflicting factual evidence that you can present that would prove this to be completely incorrect in the wrong way of thinking, that I encourage you, please come forth and do so. Let's have the discussion, because it's definitely a way that all of us can grow. So until then, peace and love, and hopefully I'll hear from you. Peace.